Welcome to That Good Fight, a Reformation for Gentlemen. My name is Aaron Edwards, and I am joined by the mythical beast. It's the one who is and yet has not been of this podcast in recent weeks, but is still here today.
I do exist.
Yeah.
Yes, hello.
Hello. Where have you been?
Where haven't I been?
That's an equally valid question.
Very philosophical response. Yeah. No, where have I been? I don't know. I'm trying to remember why I haven't been around.
Technically, I've been away in lots of places.
You've been with lots, but you've been to Iraq.
Yeah.
And have you been to India yet, or is that eventually India soon?
India's coming soon. I was in Iraq.
Okay.
I was also in Texas.
Yeah.
And then Oxford.
So you rang me. I forgot all about your planned travels to India. And you rang me in the Tesco. I was in Tesco car park. No, hang on, that's not right. You rang me and then I called you back in Tesco car park.
Right.
Scintillating stuff this, isn't it, listeners?
Yes.
And you then said to me, your first thing you said was, India's now had a ceasefire. And I just thought you'd taken an inordinate interest in Indian politics. I was like, why are you telling me about an Indian ceasefire?
Yeah.
I didn't connect the two, that you were telling me this because you were planning to go to India.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I mean, I thought as a geopolitically connected, that's just the kind of thing we just talk about, random.
Clearly, yeah.
Random.
It just came from nowhere. I was like,
yeah.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it. I mean, I was glad to hear it, but,
yeah,
it's weird.
Or did it make you think that we were at war with India?
Yeah. Yes. I was like, have I missed something in the last 24 hours?
Have you not noticed the imminent boats landing every day?
These nuclear,
That's what
these Indian
troops means, Nathan.
Stop the bus. Yes.
That's your army.
Yes. An Indian armada.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. No. So we have been. It's been hard to get things together. But we did actually also, in fairness, listeners.
Oh yeah. Sorry about this.
We did record an episode for you, a brilliant episode, which,
in fact, it's probably the best episode anyone has ever made.
I'm almost 100%, almost 100% positive that that's true.
I'm willing to say 100.
Let's say 100.
Let's say 100%. It was the best episode.
No,
the best podcast episode anyone has ever recorded.
I think that's
that's fair.
The Holy Spirit will vouch for us. I hope
absolutely.
But no one will know because we did press record. And for some providential reason, the Lord felt that whatever we said that day was not fit.
This will not be released. He just knew it was too good. Joe Rogan would have quit.
That's it.
Douglas Murray out of it.
Yeah, the guys are there, but I'm in a way. You're ahead of the game. I've got other things to do.
The Lord knew that we were just doing it too well.
That's it.
It would have embarrassed everyone. And what would the world be without a whole podcast industry?
Exactly right. Yeah.
And it would have been the end of it once we released that episode.
That is true. So anyway, so indeed, we did actually try to record an episode, but it died. But here we are. We're recording one now. If you're still with us, 2 minutes and 59 seconds in.
Yes.
And what we were discussing then, and one thing we'll be picking up, there's obviously so much to talk about, and there were so many themes to kind of explore on the same sort of themes that we unpacked in the first 5 episodes when we began this last year, over being evangelical, reformational, Christendomian, patriotic and gentlemanian. So if you want to go and see, if you are a new listener and you have made it through the first 3 minutes of this podcast, you could go and listen to those and to hear what the podcast is kind of about, the kind of themes we're orienting around, and especially we want to talk about the way in which they affect Britain as well. How does the church in Britain, the men in Britain, the Christian men in this nation right now who face the world that we currently live in, and the challenges that we've seen in the church in recent times. And this is something that I'm especially reflecting on, having gone to the Trash World conference in Texas, which feels like a long time ago now. I can't remember how long. I think it's about a month ago now, but it feels longer than that. And we had a couple of episodes, of course, interview episodes with Joel Webben and Calvin Robinson in the lead up to that conference. And it's still, there were still sort of ripple effects of that conference in many ways in the Reformed world. We've discussed some of these issues before, but at root, it does speak to this issue of men and of the issue of how men are reacting to the moment we're in the church, and the different ecclesiastical authorities, the different approaches to the missional moment. So the moment that we're in as the church, what should we emphasize? What should we not emphasize? What questions should we be asking? And what questions should we be parking or shelving temporarily? In many ways, that's at the heart of what the fissures on the American Reformed right have been about in the last sort of 6 months, 9 months or so. And so the Trash World Conference was an interesting sort of culmination point of that, where you had all of these people who, several speakers who hadn't, who were slated to speak at this conference and then weren't, and they belonged to different tribes and different factions. And many people still talking about, I think it was referred to by one speaker, prominent speaker at a conference recently, as the racist conference, which I think was quite a
who said that?
Jeff Durbin.
He
made a joke about it. So it was over a conference which I forget the name of it, Reformed Con maybe. Making that up.
The one where James White was at as well.
I think James White was there. I think Gabe Wrench and Chock Knox were there. Okay. Those two from cross politics circles. So it was like, but Chock Knox was at the Trash World Conference for a day. So he wasn't, I don't know if he was fully in support of everything, but he was clearly not against it, anathematizing it in the way that some have. And of course, Chock Knox is black himself, and I think that's what Jeff Durbin made quite a funny joke actually when they came. I think they said, I think it was a panel they were sat on, and Virgil Walker, another black guy who's been a very prominent voice to the Just Thinking podcast, really good stuff, and with Daryl Harrison, I think they did lots of good stuff around the COVID times. Anyway, so I think Chock Knox is already on the panel, and then they're like, do we need Virgil up here? And then Jeff Durbin makes a joke. He's like, oh, do we need another black guy? And then that was quite a funny, like, risque comment, because of course Jeff Durbin's not racist, but he's making, we're like almost joking about the DEI thing. And then he's like, oh, sorry, I forgot. I thought we were at the Trash World Conference. And then the room completely didn't respond to that joke well, and neither did the other guys on the panel, to their credit. So they were not willing to go, so they're like, oh, but like, it wasn't the kind of, this is a funny, awkward moment. It was just a genuinely awkward moment.
Yeah, no true word said in jest, sort of.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was a bit weird. And I think it spoke to some of the tribalism that's there. And to be honest, and Jeff Durbin's still does loads of great stuff, and loads of people respect him a lot. And I do just think that comment sounded like it was part of this tribalistic problem of people, categorizing people in certain ways because they don't agree with their missional perspective on.
Was this recorded?
Yeah, it was on. I saw it on X. You could see it. And obviously, people in favour of the Trash World vibe were dining out on it because it was quite an obvious win for them in a way, because it showed that to some listeners in the UK, I did mention Britain earlier, they're like, why does a random panel in an American Reform conference even slightly matter? Well, it does matter, because it's completely related to these tensions that we've been talking about that affect the young men and the kind of older men in different generations, and then maybe the people in between who are like, oh, who do I side with in these debates? Should we be siding? Should there be all these divisions? Well, I don't think there should be, really. I think there should be a lot more charity for people who are doing different things, even if you can't see why someone should be doing it. Why do you focus on nationalism? Why can't we just focus on being salt and light in general and the kingdom of God? Why do you have to talk about nationalism, is what some would say? Why do you have to talk about American heritage or British heritage and culture? Why do you have to talk about race in any concept, in any context whatsoever? Aren't you just becoming like the left were? So that's where this term, the woke right, is.
James Lindsay.
Yeah, James Lindsay.
Doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, and that's something about the notion of the. Well, have you come across much of the discourse on that recently?
Yes, yeah. I saw you was on Jordan Peterson's podcast and made some absurd comments about Lucifer.
It was hilarious.
I mean, it was awkward. But I also noticed him on Twitter subsequently guffawing over the fact that woke right is persisting as a label. And I suppose to some extent he's correct, but only in the sense that he publishes about 19,000 tweets a day and mentions the woke right in every single one of them, sometimes more than once.
So he could single-handedly...
Yes. I think have you seen how many times he posts?
No, I haven't.
It's insane. Check his Twitter. Everyone's pause the podcast and come back, obviously.
Yeah.
But go and look at how many times James Lindsay has posted already today, whenever your today is. It's insane.
He's such a bad faith actor. You can just tell, can't you? There's some people who just you recognise as unvirtuous.
So we should probably explain for people who are listening and don't know any of this. James Lindsay was one of a trio of academics who very famously they got on the Joe Rogan podcast as a result. They did like this hoax, but it was deliberately intended as a exposing hoax, which they published an article with the most absurd identity politics markers. Like, I can't remember one of them, like dog walking is rape culture or something was one of them. And yeah, it was stupid things, and comparing things to Hitler, of course, is basically imitating leftist leftist rhetoric. And they managed to get it published and had it published. And go and look it up on YouTube, because there's a really funny video in which they're reading out the acceptance letters by the journal editors.
Yeah.
And the journal editors are saying, "Thank you for this insightful article. I had never thought about the way in which..." Yeah, blah, blah, blah.
Helen Pluckrose was one of the others, wasn't she?
That's right.
Forget who.
So he made his fame with that. And then subsequently has written... He was very interesting over the COVID period, because you're not just responding to COVID, but specifically he was one of those at length speaking about cultural Marxism, the idea that, besides the communistic social fiscal policies of Marxism, there is a Gramscian cultural aspect to it, that it seeks to, the slow march through the institutions.
Yeah.
And he was very good at speaking about that, and specifically very good at identifying the ways in which the left uses language to weaponize and to subjugate, which is, pausing for a moment, that's why the Jeff Durbin thing is a bit concerning, because even if I suspect the Jeff Durbin comment, from what you've just described, I have to go and look at it. My suspicion is that it's just a comment made in the moment. He'd already made one joke, and then he's made another, and this one just happened not to land very well. We've all done that.
Yeah.
But even if it's just, if in any way it's implying that he uses the racist accusation, because it is a weaponized term, and we have to acknowledge that nowadays who weaponizes it the most? It is the opposition. It is the left who would have us be labelled in order to shut us up.
Yeah.
So it's just unfortunate that he would even begin to play with that weaponization. Anyway, back to the point, which is James Lindsay. So James Lindsay then started talking increasingly about Christian nationalism as soon as it started to become a thing online, was very suspicious of it. I want to remind everyone he's an atheist, or was an atheist, certainly not a Christian, not in any way sympathetic to Christian issues. And most recently, he has coined this notion of the woke right. What we've got here is a leftist, and he self-admitted he used to be on the left. He was one of those "I left the left" types. And then he comes along, and he's unhappy with the fact that those who have been, like me and you, Aaron, have been involved in conservative philosophy, conservative thinking for a while. This is not new to us. This isn't 6 months ago we started thinking in these ways. Yeah. We've been thinking conservatively and trying to, not just in theological terms, but in political terms too, for years. Yeah. And he's come in, he's gone, all these people have paid for my podcasts and episodes and things like that. But I don't like the way in which these conservative people who have supported and created the very spheres in which I now operate are waking up to, and this is where he's getting the term woke right, are waking up to certain other realities. They are gaining, as it were, a class consciousness. And this is why he's saying it's all Marxist. It's all Marxist in form. The alternative, James, is that it could be something like we are realizing that there is that the old forms of conservative, or the old sort of political discourse doesn't work the same way it used to, that things have changed and we are changing with them. And he doesn't like the fact that we are more conservative than he wants this new space in which he's found himself to be.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing with that is the parallel with Christian.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Let's not say Christian versions of James Lindsay. That might be a bit too harsh. But I mean those who've, let's say, gained a platform because of their stance against COVID, which was valid, and their stance against cultural Marxism. But let's just not forget that you can challenge cultural Marxism in a non-Christian way. And I think that many of the people on the further right, who I'm in many ways far more sympathetic with, in terms of, well, let's say I'm sympathetic with them, and that's why I was at the Trash World conference. That's why I'm happy to, publish a book with New Christendom Press and generally lauds the efforts of them, because I think they're actually genuinely fighting for something distinctively Christian. It's not that the people who don't see all that they see or emphasize all they emphasize aren't emphasizing Christian distinctives. It's that they fail to realize that the critique of cultural Marxism, you can't just go, well, can I still keep a bit of it? Can I still keep a bit of feminism? Can I still keep a bit of liberalism?
Well, can I give an example?
Yeah, go for it.
So the leader of FIC, John Stevens, a favourite of the podcast.
Of course.
Look, I'm sure he's a good man. I'm sure he strokes his
I have met him and he's a nice guy.
Yeah, apparently he's a nice guy in person. So I'm sure he's a decent bloke, and I'm sure he loves the Lord, and the Lord loves him. So let's not disparage him too greatly. However, we have our significant reservations about his leadership of the FIC. I say that as one who was in the FIC until...
The Fellowship of Independent Evangelical
in the UK.
Churches.
The last vestige of conservative evangelicalism. And I remember this being in an exchange with him on Twitter, actually, in which he used the term reactionary. Now,
what of you? Were you?
Well, of me and of generally in fact, it was actually specifically about those who are regaining a love of Latin and of classical culture, and he called us reactionaries. And I said,
that's quite ironic, really.
Stupid. Yeah, I mean, it is stupid. I'm not calling him stupid. I'm saying that point is stupid. If anything, because Christianity is a synthesis of classical. It's the great synthesis of classical civilization, which means that we bring the ancient world with us and remake it anew in Christ's image. Anyway, but he uses
it's reactionary. Go on.
Otherwise known as reactionary. But he uses this term reactionary, and most of you will know that yes, it has a vernacular meaning now, but its technical meaning and the meaning it still really has in political discourse, because it's usually used by the left, is a Marxist phrase. Yeah. The reactionaries are those who react to the revolution, react to the progress of historical material conditions tending towards class consciousness and revolution. That's what it means. And so if you're going to start using the term reactionary, at least own the fact that it comes from somewhere. Yeah. And you might say, well, the meaning has changed. Yeah, the meaning has changed, but not so much that you should feel comfortable using this language.
Well, it's if you use it as though we should all know immediately that when you use it, that's a bad thing.
Yes.
So, and I don't mean that. So when we think of reactionary, I guess you're naturally imputing there, when someone uses that, it's imputing thoughtless, reckless, hasn't got kind of control over their emotions or their thoughts, and they're just natural, knee-jerk. They're not thought, they're unthinking. I think that's what they probably think.
That's definitely the first level of what people mean, is definitely that. The second level, though, surely has to be conceded that the second level is that there is a progress of society, and those who oppose it are reactionary. So they're reacting against the inevitable progress of society. So even
like
if it's
an old person who doesn't want the new technology, thing.
There's another way of putting it. You know, when people call them dinosaurs, or they're, here in Alfreton, when we do street preaching, we see comments on Facebook of, when we've put stuff online, and they'll say, "Oh, religion is just dead and gone. It belongs in the past." And so this is what I mean. Reactionary. You're just trying to bring stuff. You're just reacting to the progress of things. And for John Stevens, who is the leader of the FIC, the leader, erstwhile, of the conservative evangelical church in the United Kingdom, to use the term reactionary when every one of his other convictions, theologically, would easily be dismissed as reactionary by anyone else, but he's just a little bit to the left of everyone else, so he's happy to weaponize the term against everyone to his right. Yeah. So it's bonkers, and this is what we're saying. It's like during the BLM stuff, Black Lives Matter stuff, my great opposition to it, besides the fact that it ruined the gospel and it's short-circuited, even when it comes to like Jesus and Syrophoenician woman, did he have internal prejudice that he didn't, blah, 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 unconscious bias? But more than that, it's the number of Christians who are willing to use this sort of identitarian racial language and imbibe the racial animus of the age unthinkingly. Isn't it Francis Schaeffer who said the problem with and this is speaking in the 80s, isn't it? The problem with evangelicals is that they think in bits and pieces rather than in wholes. Yes. And that was my great problem when I saw John Stevens use reactionary. It was my great problem when I saw evangelical churches here in the UK talking and affirming Black Lives Matter, like where Aaron and I were from. In Chester, all the churches during Black Lives Matter, apart from one or two, signed a public letter supporting Black Lives Matter, which has aged like milk. Yeah. So when you do this, you're thinking in bits and pieces rather than in wholes. Perhaps there is a logic to Black Lives Matter, and there's a logic to thinking in terms of reactionaries and progressives that corrodes the very heart of the gospel.
But the irony is, as you say, that the ticking and the signing of those statements back then, it's now uncool. Like it isn't, woke is not cool anymore. Yeah. Whereas, so you don't have evangelical pulpits in this country. I would venture there's hardly any evangelical pulpits which are currently apologising for whiteness. When George Floyd died, they were, and they haven't publicly acknowledged that. Rarely have they publicly acknowledged we were wrong there. We were led by secular culture. We were led by the currents of the age. Even though we're supposed to be famous because we're evangelicals for standing on biblical authority against the currents of the age, that's why we hold on to these doctrines of whatever it is, penal substitution, or previous generations, the bodily resurrection, or we oppose same-sex marriage, and so we're holding the evangelical verities. But on these things, we have this kind of post-colonial guilt consciousness because we're Westerners, but we're not really allowed to identify that because we just see the gospel as this abstract entity that has no cultural import whatsoever, because otherwise we wouldn't be evangelical sufficiently. And so we're going to, we're going to go down this road and we're going to fall for this head over heels. Like in America, of course, the SBC fell head over heels precisely because they actually had institutional racism kind of built in maybe, or at least maybe living memory for some, and at least in one generation removed for others, like not letting black people into their seminaries, etc. So there are different cultural contexts where the systemic racism issue, the guilt complex, affected institutions more. But in this country, I think it was so much more embarrassing. And it's not like I want to give the SBC and some of those seminaries a free pass for their nonsense. The kind of, who's the guy you wanted to talk about using critical theory as a helpful analytic tool? I forget the guy's name, but he's clearly liberal and posing as a conservative. And letting some of those people in, those people of those convictions, was a mistake. But it's you can see, at least you can have some empathy, to use that another loaded term, for why they've done that. Here it's just performative. It's, oh look, this big thing's happened in America, we must react to it. Oh, I didn't realize until the Holy Spirit revealed to me because of the death of a guy the other side of the world, who let's not even go into all the details of it, but it's so stupid. It's so the absolute, like the crowdly stupidity.
It's also cringe.
It was so cringeworthy. And so it's fine to make mistakes. We all make mistakes, but no, everyone just quietly put it under the rug. That never happened. And ironically now they're probably more likely to hit people with the woke right brush that Lindsay goes. So calling people racists and identifying them as racist because they're, I don't know, highlighting some importance in their forebears, or caring about their people, or caring about their nation, not wanting it to be overrun by Islam, or even just not wanting to lose the culture of their place and the people. So British culture, yes, it's multicultural, etc. But as in there's a variety of ethnicities, etc. So it's not it's straightforward in Britain, but still, is there an Anglo-Saxon people? Is it okay for them to care about their people? Or no, you're not allowed to do that, because that now makes you a racist woke right. So if you have any grievance about, let's say, Muslims taking over Britain, well, that's just what the kind of Black Lives Matter narrative was. And then you go, yeah. That narrative that you swallowed at the time and pretended you weren't swallowing it fully because you kept some kind of critique of it at the time. Oh, I'm not going fully for Black Lives Matter, but I think there is this racial consciousness that we've overlooked because we're actually secretly racist because we're white. So it's actually the same problem. It's the same toxin that's affecting people, giving them this I guess this muffler to stop them saying what they really need to say when it really needs to be said.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We've talked before, haven't we? And I can't remember now. Even as I say that, did we talk before in the best podcast that was never released? Or did we talk about it in episodes that were released, which are obviously inferior?
Can't wait to listen to that episode in heaven.
Yes, it's going to be when the perfect comes. Yeah. when the perfect comes.
All the other podcast episodes in the world will disappear.
Yeah, absolutely.
How best this
podcast will cease. Yes, at last. Yeah. Well, I can't remember if we talked about it then, but this so-called vibe shift, we've definitely mentioned that in previous episodes. We talked about it at length in this perfect episode. Yeah. But just things are changing here. Yeah. So even here in the UK, not now in terms of church, but most will know that, I'm not going to date this too terribly, but in May of 2025 or late April, I can't remember now, we had by-elections here and local elections, and now we don't know what's going to come. I could in 4 years' time be made to look like an absolute fool and say it was actually completely inconsequential, but it certainly Reform, the right of the Conservative Party did remarkably well. I also saw on the BBC recently, like the rape gang scandal. I saw a woman being able to respond to a Labour Party politician on the Laura Koonsberg show, and this woman is clearly a working class woman, clearly not decent and BBC and middle class, but she's being given an opportunity and a platform that is being broadcast on the BBC to react to a Labour politician saying that her concerns over the Asian grooming gangs were dog whistles, racist dog whistles, and there she is being given a chance to say it. Over and over again, companies are and this is everything that you're hearing from inside Hollywood, from inside the corporate world, both here in the UK and in America, is that companies are pulling back from the madness of woke ideology. Even recently here in the UK, the one moment of sanity that we've actually had is the Supreme Court ruling, which has very firmly ruled that women are those who are biologically born as women. And that has meant, and we've seen the effect of that as the NHS scrambles to be compliant. I think the most recent thing is that only biological women can use bathrooms, women's bathrooms. You have cricket as well. I saw this, and in the sports world, it's beginning to have an effect. So this vibe shift is beginning to have real practical effects. I'm not saying it's total. I still think there's still madness in the world, and obviously there's still a vast difference between biblical worldview and even what constitutes secular worldview. But things are beginning to change, and as usual, the church is being left behind. So the church is not at the front of this change. In the round, the evangelical church in the UK is certainly not at the front of this change. It is not, apart from, I'm not meaning to pat ourselves on the back here, but apart from the likes of us, which other British podcaster is talking about this? There are no British leaders like there are in America, church leaders, who have contributed to the shifting of the Overton window. They are in America. Absolutely, they are in America. Before the election of Donald Trump, which precipitated a lot of this, absolutely there have been. Jeff Durbin, we mentioned him. James White, Doug Wilson, Jeff Webb, and Joel Webb, and Jeff. Thank you.
And the Ogden guys.
Yeah. But they all were there before.
Yeah.
The British people weren't there before. There's no British evangelical leadership talking in these terms. As usual, we react. We don't construct.
Yeah.
We acquiesce. We don't fight back.
That's reactionary.
That is very reactionary of me. Yeah. I mean, where is the FIEC here?
Yeah.
Where is the FIEC? For example, here is a reform party that is capturing a conservative mood within the country. Is reacting against the Labour Party and its madness and its socialist policies, and the FIEC is doing what?
Well, and this is really interesting, right? So I don't know if you may not have noticed if you've been off social media or not as on. I had last week, I think it was, I had a viral tweet. I hadn't much.
I'm sorry. Did you get medication for that? Was it painful?
That's right. It was. I'm still on the pill.
A viral tweet.
Wow. That's right. It's in fact.
Wow. Did you have to put a bandage on it, or
you've now got it? I'm afraid.
Oh my goodness, my viral tweet.
That's right. So, and it was about we've talked before about reaching the right. There was the episode about why are evangelicals so anti-right wing. I did a Substack article called something like that on refusing to reach the right, and we are trying to put that into practice. So I'm trying to it's not like putting things in a way that will reach the right wing. That's not really how I tend to think. I think naturally probably always alter your communication depending who you're speaking to, but that's different to the sort of Machiavellian pragmatism where people are literally trying to win people by, let's say, trading off or compromising what they really believe. That's not certainly not what would be in favour at all. But I do actually just genuinely want to reach people in that, because they've been unreached, especially. I think the right wing in Britain are like an unreached people group. And the weird thing is, it's as we talked about, it's a field that's ripe for harvest. There's people who care about their nation, and because evangelicals have not cared about nationhood for a long time, which is crazy, because all of the evangelical heroes that we read, like not just the Puritans, but even the Great Awakeners and then the 19th century Protestant missionaries, they had such a clear view of national covenants even.
You read Richard Baxter.
Like,
Richard Baxter or Lewis Bailey, any of these Puritans in the 17th century, they will talk in terms of England and revival in England and what England needs to do to revive, and specifically reaching England as a nation. These are, it's just Christian nationalism, isn't it, Aaron? But even, what's on our flag again? Remind me what is on our flag again? What? Just a random shape, isn't it? Just a random
flag.
Yeah, it's just a random assortment of shapes, geometric shapes arranged in a random pattern. It just so happens to look like a cross. It obviously wasn't a Christian country.
Christian nationalism is reactionary woke right. I don't know if you've heard this.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah.
An atheist told me, and I think it's pretty clever. But anyway, so yeah, it's like, even by the way, I've been reading again because I'm going to India, learning so much about, thinking again about the impact of the British Empire in India. I'll talk about that in some future episode because that'll be fun to talk about imperialism. But British evangelicals, the likes of Wilberforce, heroic Wilberforce, who the Liberals have to like, but he was a politically engaged evangelical who believed that Britain had a unique providential role in governing India. And so you're not allowed to think that now, because you're not allowed to think it was in any way good. But that's...
I have to say, he's now regarded as like a white saviour type.
Yeah.
He's actually diminished, his role is diminished.
Oh, yeah, that's true, actually, yeah. So his
voices, which is mad.
Well, indeed. But it's just amazing how you hear these evangelicals who are solidly evangelical and really fruitful missionally. Even the missionaries who sacrificed their lives to go to these places, they had a really clear view of Britain as a Christian nation and why it was necessary to bring what they had and what God had blessed Britain with to these other nations. And a vast majority of let's say all of the reverse missionaries who come to the West now from Ghana or Nigeria or places like India, but less so there, it's probably more so African and South American, who then say the West blessed us with all of this evangelical mission. And now the West is kind of going to pot. We want to bring it back, and we recognize that those nations were blessed by God and they blessed our nations, and we want to now bless them in return. So we want to bring the gospel back that they're losing. And so they're just, apparently nationhood is bad, and nationhood is adding something to the gospel. It's just this is the gospel that will let the nations be glad, as John Piper himself wrote a book on once upon a time.
Even as we said, it's like we said in the patriotism episode, the nation episode, the love of nation or the love of people, the love of place, it's all, again, it's a doctrine within the love of neighbour. And it's a doctrine within a theology of love, and people often misunderstand that, and they see it. Obviously, they read it through, to be honest, quite a post-imperial lens of power and subjugation, oppressor and oppressed. But rather than how the Bible would have us, the biblical logic for thinking about nations and people groups, which is it is a subsidiary of the doctrine of love. Exactly. We love our people. Anyway, go back to the episode. We love our mothers, and so we love it when other people love their mothers. Yeah. But even like the nation, just the civilizational aspect, the extent to which Christianity shaped the culture and the civilization, so that when that civilization reaches other civilizations, it is still bringing a kingdom boon. It's still bringing a kingdom benefit. So a few years ago, I texted you, didn't I, around Christmas time, and said, "Have you listened to?" What is it? I
can't remember.
You not remember this?
Well, I can't remember a random.
Have they heard of? Do they know it's Christmas?
Yes.
We should probably do this near Christmas. We should do like an analysis of that song, because it's really interesting.
Absolutely.
As a relic, as an artifact of a Christian world, which was still then a Christian world in 1980. Should I get off? I'm not going to get the lyrics up, but they're do they know it's Christmas after all? I want to alert our listeners to the fact that is in itself like a microcosmic expression of Christian civilization, of a Christian civilization saying, does this land in which I know that it's Ethiopia and they've had Christianity in that country for a long time. Okay, I'm just saying about the general spirit of the thing. I know that was probably a big...
We all know we're racist, Nate.
We all know that we're racist, yeah. But a notion of, do they know it's Christmas? Let us tell them, let us give them the benefits of a culture that believes that God entered into creation, his own creation, and their implications for it. Do they know? And of course, that line, "And today, thank God, it's them and not you," was, of course, I still think it's a wonderful moment in the song in which Bono sings that. It's very convicting, and the whole point is it is convicting. He's giving you. Bono, no doubt, would be thinking in these terms, as far as we can tell, that he's bringing. He's bringing an awareness that you are under the providence of God blessed. So now under the providence of God, help others. It is really, we must think of it in civilizational terms. Even though the 1980s was by no means like the 19th century, the 18th century in terms of its piety, it still had the residue of a Christian civilization, and it was one civilization, namely a Christian one, trying to help another in a way that is in a Christian fashion. The whole logic is Christian infused.
And people forget that because they've been swimming in the water so long.
Yeah, and they've sang it so many times, heard it so many times, and just think it's a Christmas song.
You go to another country, and actually that conscience element of somebody else who's oppressed, even let's not to use the oppressor-oppressed language of Marxism, but just the fact that the biblical view of caring for the oppressed and caring for the poor, that isn't normal to every culture. And like you get
heal the world, let them know it's Christmas time. It's that instinct, and also the fact that aesthetically, it's quite an interesting marrying of aesthetics and message, because the aesthetics of the song is quite manly in the sense that it's, well, maybe not manly, but it is certainly assertive. The whole aesthetic of the song, the way in which the music builds, the way in which it is constructed, it's not at the beginning. It's quite, peaceful and quite.
You're getting into the now.
Yeah, save this. Yeah, I know we should save it till Christmas time. All I'm getting at here is there is such a thing as a cultural leaven, and that can go both ways. In this instance, we're seeing it. What happens when a Christian civilization goes, hang on, they're hurting. What should we do?
Yeah, exactly. So to go back to what the kind of pivot to that I was going to was trying to reach people who care about this stuff still, who see their nation being like completely ravaged or infiltrated by ideologies, and actually it's okay to say by people as well. I don't mean to say all Muslims are infiltrators. I just mean to say that all Muslims who are immigrants to the UK, especially illegal immigrants.
Is it with you and the word invade?
I know, I love it. To be honest, in my court case, this immigration came up as a thing because it was like, and I hadn't, when I tweeted my famous invasion tweet, I wasn't at all thinking about immigration. In fact, I don't think we'd even on Pod of the Gaps, my sister podcast, we hadn't done an episode on it. It wasn't something I was even like going to town on.
So they linked your tweet about invasion with immigration, but immigration would be much harsher to homosexuality than we would be.
Well, they said it was like, you're trying to piggyback on the back of Suella Braverman's comments about an invasion of immigrants, and I was like, but
he's such a midwit.
It's moronic. It was moronic, and it came up even in court again. It's like, the opposition legal team. That's what they were like highlighting. Look at the language of invasion. And just what. This is just insane. Like the way having to argue about it. Anyway,
you remember in the 19th century and 20th century, we had barristers were these very really intelligent. I'm not saying the barrister wasn't.
My barrister was actually. Yeah.
Barrister was really, but that that sort of thinking can infiltrate.
Oh yeah.
Cases.
Oh yeah.
That is
absolutely. It is amazing. But I'm going back to the episode that we did on the case. The week in court was back. I forget what Aaron's week in court or something. Even then, the judge, I remember thinking, this is weird. Like the judge didn't know basic stuff in the Bible, so there's ideological filters even on those who are supposed to be objective. There's activists who get into the legal system, of course. I mean, of course, that's happened.
It's just the deterioration, isn't it?
Of course.
Just with education, all sorts. We've said it so many times when we've been watching or reading BBC News. We've sent articles to each other.
Yeah.
I've got a habit now. I don't know if I've said this on the podcast before, but I'm in a habit. Whenever I read a BBC article, it's written this again.
Yeah.
Search their name. And I look, they're almost always under 30 years old.
Yeah.
And they're almost, again, the BBC boardroom is not, or the newsroom is not what you think. You're thinking 1940s.
Yeah. Since Jeremy Paxman left, when Jeremy Paxman, I think he said that was what he found. He said he realised he was having conversations with staffers and others in the BBC studios and being like, I am completely out of sync here. And Paxman wasn't someone who was like, a complete... I guess he was conservative clearly, but he wasn't like card carrying. He would challenge people on both sides, and he was like, I'm a fair-minded, trying to be objective journalist, and he just doesn't see that. He sees people with completely different foundations. And that's secularism as well. That is secularism.
It's the effect of secularism that we don't care about. We don't do education well anymore because we think of it all in terms of utility, what is practical, rather than actually encouraging you to think and learn how to think well.
Yeah.
I think it's a civilizational issue in that it's not just true in the courtroom, apparently. It's not just true at the BBC boardroom. It's true at 10 Downing Street.
Yeah.
The politician class now is deeply, deeply unimpressive. Unimpressive.
Frighteningly so.
We had a letter from an MP. I'm not going to mention more of the details, but we had a letter from an MP here, and we're reading it here as a church.
Yeah.
Making some ridiculous requests and in opposition to ABC. I'm not going to go into
it. Specifically to Watch One Church?
Yes.
What, they wrote...
As a result of the newspaper.
Oh, wow.
We'll talk about another time.
Oh, that'll be fun to talk about.
We're reading this email thinking, this is a joke. It hasn't even written well. Like, what authority does this think that the politician class is weak, the teacher class is weak, the academic class is weak, and this is talking about Benedict option stuff. In that we started recording, but the need to create parallel structures is more apparent than ever.
Christian Burrows, exactly. So let's finish on Christian Burrows, and just so I know we have to close soon. But to go back to this issue of the nationalism Christian civilization thing, so. This viral tweet that the court was actually trying to challenge people on the right, British patriots, who simultaneously...
Oh, I did see this.
Yeah, they simultaneously want to like challenge Islam in a gender. So I mean, so this is people more than just like safe centre right. I mean, they're probably a bit beyond centre right, but they're not quite. They're certainly not like far right. I mean, even though me and you are far right, really technically, anyone who's not Keir Starmer,
BBC would call us far.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So, but regardless of what those terms mean, this is people who are they're safely. That they want to keep some of their secularism. So they want to say they want to keep the multicultural liberalism, which says each to their own, postmodern, your truth is not my truth, and that's fine. If it works for you, go to church. I personally don't go to church, but I really care about Muslims not taking over Britain and changing the culture. And I really care. They might even say, I really care about churches being converted into mosques. That's ridiculous. And it's funny that I've observed that kind of attitude so many times. It really, really annoys me.
Well, can I tell you an anecdote?
Please.
So it's not my anecdote to tell, really. So Pastor Ryan at Watch On Church here, he was just before Easter, I think this was. He often walks around in town and he talks to these two older ladies. He's telling me again. He can tell this better than I can. Maybe we'll get him on the podcast. But he talked to these two older ladies, and he just got talking to them. And they were talking about Islam and the spread of Islam and the change of the country, I think it was specifically as well, the negative changes in the country. They were a bit older, so it's speaking in those terms. And then he said, there is a solution to this. And he said, I'm a pastor of that church, pointing at Watch On Church. And immediately their disposition changed completely. And they started talking in terms of, Muslims have a right to be here. And Muslims, and they completely just changed on a dime.
Isn't that amazing?
Muslims, we don't, everyone has a right to believe what they want to believe. And, don't get me wrong, here in the area, we aren't exactly the most popular church. People have heard of us in local press, exactly, in the local press. So they probably, you don't want to get handled by this bigot pastor.
Yeah.
But it's madness, and you are right to challenge that. If people want to see this country change, there is really only one way to do it, and that includes, I'm speaking here as much to those old ladies as I am to Douglas Hannon. Douglas Hannon? Is it Doug Hannon? Dan Hannon. Daniel Hannon. Sorry, Dan Hannon. Conservative Lord, former Conservative MP, very, very clever, really good during the Brexit debates. He annihilated Eddie Izzard in a debate around Brexit. Absolutely, he dismantled him. Go and watch it is so satisfying. But no, he has been on podcasts and other things talking about the relationship between faith, family and flag.
Okay.
And in his mind, the flag must come before faith.
Right.
And he will talk, what do we have to bind together? It's Magna Carta. It's not Christianity. Christianity isn't really the centre of everything. Right. He's so utterly, utterly wrong on this. And he's utterly, utterly wrong, not because Magna Carta isn't instrumental, and it isn't at the centre of things. It is. But it doesn't make sense without, as per Tom Holland, again, historian, not Spider-Man, saying that this is the, or indeed... is it Justin Brierley? This is the air we breathe.
Yeah.
Glenn
Scrivener.
Glenn Scrivener, thank you, not Justin Brierley. Anyway, point is, the Magna Carta wasn't possible without Christian civilization, and we're not going to get another Magna Carta. We're not going to get another flourishing era of British society without people going to church again, even if they don't believe. Yeah. And I'm not saying that we should encourage people to have easy believism. That's my job as an elder, and Ryan's job as a pastor, and your job as a preacher, to challenge that. But what I mean is, I want these people in church, all these conservatives who maybe don't think they are Christians. I, like you were saying in your viral tweet, they need to come to church. They need to come to church, and actually maybe they'll find more there than they were.
They need to repent and follow Christ. But also, there has to be real revival. There's real fruits of revival. There will be nominalism that occurs. Kierkegaard's problem will come back to haunt any reinstantiation of Christendom, and we'll deal with that problem when we need to deal with it. We have a different problem now, and we need to focus on what it means to be a nation and to resurrect some of these remnants and ruins, because they're not completely useless. We still sit on the shoulders of great giants. And my anecdote that was sort of linked into this was, I was on a train back from Oxford a few weeks ago, and there were some of your compatriots from the northeast, which historically in the Anglo-Saxon England, what was the northeast again?
Well, there would have been Daneland, but you had Northumbria.
Northumbria, that's it. Sorry. So so the Northumbrians, they were Sunderland fans, and I don't want to speak ill of all Sunderland fans. And I know you're from Stockton-on-Tees, so these Sunderland fans were maybe they're the worst, the most depraved like football hooligans guys. Thank you, Northeast. But I know the Northeast is more conservative. They were bigger on Brexit. They're probably going to be more anti-immigration in general. But you also saw the other side of this, the kind of side that the kind of poncy, centrist or left-leaning evangelical will go, well, look what this leads to. I mean, I don't like the word toxic masculinity, but I would observe, and as someone who's played in football teams and been around very depraved songs that teams will sing on the away coach home when they're getting increasingly drunk. These were the worst songs I've ever heard. These were all white British patriots. And I was embarrassed to be British with them there. There were some foreign people on the train. They were going home from an away game. It was the last train back to the Northeast, so it would take them hours. And I just happened to be sat there. And the girls on the train, and I was like, I was worried for them. I felt like a chivalrous sort of like desire to want to make sure they didn't come to harm, because these guys are marauding up and down the carriage. They're talking randomly, and they're singing like the most disgusting songs I've ever heard about having sex with women, killing them, bringing up the body, having sex with the body.
Oh my God.
This is all in a song. And like, there's these girls who just sat there, and I'm like, and there's foreign people there who must be thinking, the English gentleman. I was like, so you're the guys who are supposed to like defend British civilization, are you? I don't want to say, I didn't really want to say this, but I think I might rather have a Muslim. I don't know if this is right to say. I would rather have a Muslim being the town mayor than you. And I know that's a pointless, ridiculous thing to say, because you can't have, if you had no mayor, would I rather have a drunken hooligan who literally is like has no respect whatever, even for his own values, and yet is also probably hates Muslims in a way that's kind of inappropriate. It's ludicrous.
Spoke at that, of course.
Yeah.
But what I think you're saying is that, as per classic virtue ethics, Christian virtue ethics too, you would rather have someone who has inculcated wisdom, righteousness, self-control, and endurance than someone who hasn't.
Exactly, yeah.
Muslim
and thinks they have
in their tradition.
Yeah.
As demonic as it is when it comes to the death of Christ and sacrifice, but nevertheless, it's more likely you're going to find a Muslim who has a degree of wisdom, a degree of justice, a degree of self-control, and a degree of endurance than you are someone who's singing about necrophilia or something.
Yeah. Proudly, as though it's like, yeah.
And this is what we're saying, is you can't do that, guys. Yeah. You can't pretend to be the defenders of the country, and you certainly can't pretend to be the defenders of this is a Christian country.
Yeah.
And then do stuff like that.
But here's the irony, right? So you can at least I say it in inverted commas, strong inverted commas. Well, at least they're conservative, right?
Yeah.
And they have, they have a clear view of some elements of masculinity. No, it's beyond even Andrew Tate levels, that. But this was the funny thing, was when I sat down, I was praying for an opportunity to get to chat to some of them. I think there's one time when a guy dropped a £5 note on the floor, and I kind of gave it back to him. And they're always trying to intimidate everyone around them. They're absolutely hammered and really on it. There's, I don't know, there must have been like 15 or 20 of them. And there's a few sat around me, and I'm sat there reading my Bible. And then eventually one of them comes up, "Oh, you like reading, do you?" And it's like, and I was, "You like reading, do you?" I can't do it. Yeah, you're a reader. One of those readers. Oh. And I'm like, yes, it is a book. But then I said, well, I like reading this book, especially. This is a good book. It's like, what, is it a good book? I was like, the good book. It's the good book. And I think, when people are being really aggressive, evangelistically, Christians need to be more aggressive. And so I'm in those situations, it's really, for me, I find it really easy to be aggressive because they're already being aggressive. It's harder to break the ice with someone who really doesn't care and feels like you're imposing upon them. But if someone's broken the ice in that way, you can go really to town. And I was like, so why didn't you? So I just started reading a psalm. Let me read you a psalm. And I went and found Psalm 1, I think. I said, what kind of life do you want to live? I just really went for it. And there's a few guys around there listening, including the guy who's now on my side, because I picked up his fiver for him, so he knows that at least he can trust me. But it's really interesting that the first time when I first opened the Bible, they say, "Oh, it's better than the Quran, isn't it?" And I was like, "Well, have you read the Bible? Do you know?" So, "Well, I haven't read it." I was like, "How do you know it's better than the Quran?" So that's the kind of attitude I'm talking about, this generic sense. Okay, maybe we could at least say, well, it's good that they recognize that they have a loyalty to Christianity, but what's the point of that loyalty if you're going to sing or support the singing of those songs? And I said, why don't you chastise your compatriots here, not to be such morons? And And he's just, oh, well, yeah, it's difficult. And I say, so when are you going to go back to church? He's like, oh, I don't go to church, it's not each to their own. All this nonsense. Like, so you're simultaneously a Neanderthal and a multicultural liberal who's a postmodernist, who's relativist on truth. It's like the worst of both worlds. So it's like,
what you did is, this is great that you did it. This is the lesson to learn. Though we are condemning their barbarism, and it is barbarism, not civilization, it is barbarism, you still spoke to them. That's more than any liberal or average Anglican vicar would do, say. Some would. But what I'm getting at is we need to still be able to talk to these men. As we've been saying on this podcast so many times, they are, even if you think them beyond I don't know, the boundaries of reasonable, decent society, someone has to reach them. And I preached a sermon recently here at Watron on that point about Joab and on about how we need to reach Joab. So we need to reach again men who would be called sons of thunder.
Absolutely.
And if David, for example, had done something about Joab, he might not have to eventually have his man kill him.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes to link to that.
Yeah, but we need to reach these young men and we do need, Jordan Peterson's advice to churches is still really good. Yeah. We need to have banners outside the church, and we're planning to get one here. Not only that, but an English flag too. But we need to have banners up saying, young men, we want you, we need you.
Yeah.
And I want those men at our church. I want them. Yeah, exactly. I want them. If that means making people feel uncomfortable, I'd rather them be in the building in church where they can hear the gospel than anywhere else. So I want them. I don't care what their language is either.
We're not going to sing their songs, just we winsome. That's the irony of that. That's what that's again.
Come on, things wrong.
That's it. This is we have a little bit of yeah. But that's the thing. Exactly right. I think that's so. This is why genuinely, the 1 Corinthians 9 point. This would be it's okay to try to build bridges as long as you're willing to challenge. So you should challenge the right. It's not really the case of I'm sure even my American brothers who are annoyed at, let's say, the challenge to no enemies to the right on a political scale, I think they would still challenge people at least in one-on-one situations, I would hope, when they see a lack of Christian virtue in what they're doing, or even a lack of Christian virtue in a political policy that's being espoused, even if the general sense, we're on your team because we're against Islam or whatever. We need to challenge that. So you need to be able to challenge both the problem with the winsomeness to the left, which the FIEC, John Stevens, all that, what they were doing, the BLM nonsense, that was uncritical, exclusive winsomeness to the left, which didn't want to reach the right, didn't want to win the right, and didn't want to challenge the left sufficiently. They probably kept a little challenge to prove on paper that they had challenged them. So no one, all these evangelists wouldn't have said, they would have said, I don't agree with your sexual ethics on homosexuality or something, but, I can see where God really loves uniting people who care about their desires and wants to make them whole, and therefore Jesus can make you whole, and your same-sex attraction can be, so we can find a place for that. So they didn't push hard. They didn't do the Boniface axe to the root of the tree. And I think we need to do both. So we definitely want to challenge these people on the further right who don't care, and challenge them in the way that will actually help them, which sometimes is actually to be more forthright and direct with them, in the way you would have the missionaries to the Vikings had to be. Yeah. And that's the irony. The funny thing about it is when that tweet went viral. Paul Golding, we've mentioned previously, of Britain First, so a full-on far-right party, as far as I know, retweeted it as it hits the nail on the head. And that's really interesting because it wasn't like I was doing just when our nation's back, let's get rid of the Muslims. This was challenging the people on the far right to actually repent of their sin, follow Christ as their Lord and Saviour, and come to church. And it's interesting that a leader of a far-right party called Britain First...
Does he go to a church?
I mean, hey, maybe we could have him on sometime. I don't know, because that's it. Well, I'd like to have a conversation with. I want to talk to those people who care about the nation, who care about Christian values, and I want to know precisely the content of their faith, because that's really important, or what they think their faith is, because some people could be using Christianity as a veneer, but in reality, that's still something to work with. Yeah. That's really helpful. So, but it's interesting that he would retweet it and say this is helpful, because it wasn't just a kind of Christianity get our nation back, it was, if you want to get your nation back, you actually need Christ. And you need to go to church. You don't need to complain about Muslims. You need to be the ones who are being positive. And by all means, I complain about Islam, but I want to do it from a place of Christian civilization, not just generic secularism. So
I don't know what else I've got to add, but our hearty amen to that. This is what we're saying. There's a balance here, isn't there? We can't just, this isn't about winning culture at any, just playing culture. It is, there is a balance. We have to speak to those who are concerned for cultural issues, affirming the extent to which they have whatever is true. Think about these things. To the extent that they have a modicum of truth, we should affirm that.
Absolutely.
And then we should challenge them. So in principle, I'm not opposed to speaking to anyone on this podcast. But yeah, if we did have that sort of conversation, I'd want to ask him, so are you going to church then? That's what needs to happen. And what have you been reading the Bible?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. No, absolutely. Yeah. So anyway, well, there's so much more we could talk to, and we did want to talk about Christian boroughs, but we'll talk about that. Maybe we'll talk about the next time when we get a chance.
Because I am from the Northeast and therefore don't talk right in it.
Like
when you first said Christian boroughs, and I'm a borough, like
borough. Oh, that's funny.
I thought you were saying burrows, like we're all going to become like little creatures who go underground.
Well, to be honest, that's probably etymologically, I bet that's probably what it is. It's like Edinburgh was people who were here and they burrowed into the ground, and that's.
You need to watch this clip online. Like, we'll end with this, right? You need to go and search Middlesbrough BBC interview, because there's a hilarious YouTube video. There's a BBC, talk about like patrician BBC class going to the Northeast, and he's interviewing them on he's interviewing these Middlesbrough people on their accent, and he's trying to say butter, and he's butter. He's say no butter, say tomorrow, tomorrow. Anyway, I thought, honestly, when you were saying borough,
that's so funny.
I would say, but then what's the thing that musicians do when they go around and play music? They go on a
tour.
I'd say tour.
A tour. Oh my goodness. Tour.
I've lost a lot of my accent.
Yeah.
Not entirely.
Yeah.
But I cannot for the life of me say tour.
Tour.
Never say it. I said
tour.
Tour.
Yeah. And Americans for borough would say
tour. No, say poor.
Actually, is there different? Because Americans say Edinburgh, don't they?
Yeah, they're just wrong though.
That's just incorrect. Sorry, America. No, not sorry. You should be sorry. Anyway, so we will talk about Christian boroughs because it's really important. And actually, I had someone contact me about that today. There's lots of people in Britain who need to think about this and what it would entail. The King's Hall did a great episode on that a while ago. I think it was the Alfred option, and they did a whole conference on it, I think, last year.
Lots of these Americans realising how English they really are.
They are. Absolutely. They can't get away from it.
And just one more step, guys. You just need to take the one more step.
That's it.
Who binds the boroughs together?
Sadly, we need a proper Christian nationalist government, and then that'll be right. But until then, I don't know if they would want to hook themselves to the Keir Starmer sinking ship, as it were. But let's hope and pray for
the king.
Oh, sorry, that too, actually. Not too much hope for William. Maybe George is the future. So that's something to pray for. Well, indeed, and on that note, in fact. Be strong in the Lord and the strength of his might. Defy the devil and act like men. Love the brotherhood. Fear God. Christ is Lord. God save the King. Amen. See you next time.